The baby stopped breathing. 5 paramedics surrounded the small body, hands moving, voices urgent. Nothing worked. Elizabeth Davies stood in the shadows, watching. She'd seen this before. 8 years ago. Her little brother Tyler, same blue lips, same death. But this time, she knew how to save him. If she spoke, she'd lose everything. If she stayed silent, he'd die. She had seconds. 6 months earlier, Elizabeth had walked through those gates with 1 bag and 1,000 regrets. She wasn't looking for a new life. She was running from the old one. Bellevue, Washington, a city of glass towers and tech money, where people asked for your skills, not your story, where you could disappear into the background and nobody cared why. That's what she needed, to disappear. The job was simple. Clean the house, cook when needed, stay quiet. The billionaire who owned the estate traveled constantly. His wife had died 2 years ago. There was a little boy, 2 years old, a nanny, a few staff members. Elizabeth didn't ask questions. They didn't ask hers. Perfect. But houses, like that. They hold secrets. The kind that sit heavy in the air. The kind you feel before you see. The nanny had shaking hands and eyes that never rested. The older woman who ran the house moved like she was guarding something. The groundskeeper barely spoke, and when they did talk, their words felt rehearsed. Careful, Elizabeth noticed. But she said nothing, because she had her own secret, a green bottle, hidden in her room, wrapped in cloth, filled with something her grandmother taught her to make the week after Tyler died. She'd carried it for 8 years, city to city, job to job, a weight she couldn't put down. She told herself she'd never need it again, that the knowledge she carried, the thing that could have saved her brother if only she'd known sooner, would stay buried with him. But God doesn't waste pain. He hides it, shapes it, saves it, for the moment it's needed most. And in 6 months, that moment would come. On a warm afternoon, when a child would collapse, when professionals would fail, when a father would scream for someone, anyone, to save his son. And Elizabeth, invisible Elizabeth, would have to choose between the shadows she'd learned to live in and the light that might destroy her. Before we begin, subscribe, like this video, and tell me where in the world you're watching from, because sometimes God hides us in the darkness just long enough to prepare us for our purpose. 6 months earlier, the rain had just stopped when Elizabeth reached the gates. She stood there for a moment, staring up at the house on the hill. Glass and steel, clean lines, the kind of place you see in magazines and think, people don't really live like that. But they did. Her phone buzzed. The address was right. This was it. She adjusted the strap of her bag. Everything she owned fit inside. A few shirts, a pair of jeans, a photo of Tyler she kept hidden, and the bottle, always the bottle. The intercom crackled. "Miss Davies?" "Yes." "Service entrance. Come around to the north side." The gates opened without a sound. Elizabeth walked up the long driveway. Her sneakers crunched on white gravel, past gardens that looked like someone painted them, past fountains that probably cost more than her mother's house back in Alabama. She'd been running for 8 years. Alabama to Georgia, Georgia to Colorado, Oregon, and now here, the Pacific Northwest, rain and mountains, and people who didn't ask about your past. She needed that. At the side entrance, a woman waited. 50s, sharp eyes, expensive clothes, the kind of person who noticed everything and forgot nothing. "I'm Patricia Albright. I manage this household." Her voice was cold, efficient. "You're the housekeeper?" "Yes, ma'am." Patricia looked her over, taking in the worn bag, the cheap shoes, the quiet desperation of someone who needed this job and couldn't afford to lose it. "Mr. Hudson values privacy above everything else. You clean, you help with meals, you assist with the child when needed, but you don't talk about this family. Not to friends, not online, not to anyone." She paused. "The last person who forgot that rule? Gone the same day." Elizabeth nodded. They walked inside. The house was beautiful, windows everywhere, views of the water, art on the walls, but it felt cold, like a showroom, like nobody actually lived here. "Mr. Hudson's wife passed 2 years ago," Patricia said as they climbed the stairs. "Right after their son was born. He travels constantly now, building his company. You'll see the boy more than he will." She said it like it was normal, like fathers were supposed to be gone. They reached the third floor. Staff rooms. Patricia opened a door. Small room, bed, dresser, window overlooking the garden. It was the nicest place Elizabeth had stayed in years. "Dinner is at 7. Don't be late." Patricia left. Elizabeth sat on the bed, unpacked her bag slowly. The photo went in the drawer. The bottle, wrapped in a towel, went in the back of the closet. She looked out the window at the perfect view, but something felt wrong. She couldn't name it. Just a heaviness in the air, like the house was holding its breath. That night at dinner, she understood why. The staff kitchen was smaller than the rest of the house, quieter, like a place where people forgot how to talk. 2 people sat at the table when Elizabeth walked in. A young woman, blonde, maybe 23, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks. She pushed food around her plate but didn't eat. And a man, older, weathered hands, the kind of face that had learned silence was safer than words. "You must be Elizabeth," the young woman said, forcing a smile. "I'm Jenny. I take care of Brian." The man nodded but didn't speak. "That's Thomas," Jenny added. "He manages the grounds." Elizabeth sat down. The food was good, salmon, roasted vegetables, the kind of meal she hadn't eaten in years. But nobody was eating. "How long have you both been here?" Elizabeth asked. 14 months, Jenny said. Fast, like she'd practiced the answer. Thomas didn't look up. 2 years. Started right after Mrs. Hudson died. "Do you like working here?" Jenny's smile tightened. "Mr. Hudson is very generous. He expects a lot, but he's fair." Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, careful. Before Elizabeth could ask more, Patricia appeared in the doorway. "Jenny, Mr. Hudson just got home. Brian needs you." Jenny stood immediately. She didn't finish her food, didn't say goodbye, just left. The kitchen went quiet again. Elizabeth felt it then, the weight of things nobody was saying, the sense that everyone in this house was playing a part. 2 weeks later, she met Brian. She was cleaning the nursery when Jenny brought him back from outside. He toddled in on unsteady legs, blonde hair, blue eyes, so small. He saw Elizabeth and stopped, stared at her with the kind of trust only children have. Then he smiled. Bright, pure, reached his little hands toward her. Elizabeth's heart cracked open. He looked like Tyler, not in features, but in that innocence, that belief that adults would keep him safe. "Brian, no," Jenny said quickly, scooping him up. "She's working." But Elizabeth saw something in Jenny's face. Sadness, guilt, something haunted. That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Brian's smile, about the way Jenny's hands shook when she held him, about the way Patricia watched everyone like a hawk, about Thomas making phone calls in the garage with the door closed. 3 weeks in, she heard it. Voices, low and urgent, coming from the linen closet near the nursery. Elizabeth slowed her steps, listened. "I can't keep doing this," Jenny's voice, strained, scared. "You don't have a choice, Patricia," cold as ice. "He's just a baby. We've been planning this for 2 years. Don't lose your nerve now." Silence. Then footsteps. Elizabeth moved fast, down the hall with her cleaning cart, heart pounding. Patricia stepped out, saw her 30 feet away. Their eyes met, and Elizabeth knew. She'd heard too much. Elizabeth learned the rhythm quickly. Wake before dawn. Clean in silence. Stay out of sight when Mr. Hudson was home, which wasn't often. She saw him maybe 3 times that first month, always on his phone, always stressed, carrying weight that went beyond business. When he looked at the framed photos of his wife, beautiful woman with kind eyes, his face would break for just a second. Then he'd turn away, bury himself in work, running from grief, Elizabeth thought. She understood that. But it was Brian who stayed on her mind. She wasn't supposed to spend time with him. That was Jenny's job. But when she cleaned the playroom, he'd be there. Stacking blocks, playing with trucks, looking up at her with those bright eyes. "Baby," he'd say, his word for everyone. And every time, Elizabeth's chest would tighten. He reminded her too much of Tyler. A month in, Jenny mentioned Brian was sick. "Just a stomach thing," she said at dinner. "Kids pick up everything." But something about how she said it felt off. A week later, sick again. "Probably from the play center," Jenny explained. Patricia's sharp look across the table. Another week. Another illness. Elizabeth started paying closer attention. She noticed Patricia prepared Brian's bottles personally, every single one, in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. She noticed Jenny's hands shook when she fed him. She noticed how Thomas made those phone calls in the garage, voice low but tone hostile. They moved like pieces on a board, coordinated, purposeful, and Brian kept getting sicker. One morning, Elizabeth was putting away laundry in the nursery when she heard him coughing. Not a normal cough. Deep, painful. Jenny rushed in, face pale. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, picking him up, but her voice cracked. Elizabeth watched from the doorway. Brian's color was off, his energy lower than usual. He'd lost weight. Her old instincts kicked in, the ones from before she dropped out, before Tyler died. When she was studying medicine and learning to see what others missed, this wasn't normal childhood illness. This was something else. That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the pattern, the timing, the way Patricia controlled everything Brian ate and drank, the way Jenny looked guilty every time she fed him, the way Thomas waited, watched, like they were all waiting for something. She thought about leaving, about walking away before she got tangled in whatever darkness lived in this house. But then she thought about Brian's smile, his trust, the way he reached for her with those small hands, like Tyler used to. No, she told herself, not again. If something was wrong, she'd find out what, even if it cost her everything. The next morning, while cleaning the kitchen, Elizabeth saw it. Patricia preparing Brian's morning bottle, reaching into the cabinet, pulling out a small vial, measuring something into the formula with precision, then stirring it slowly. Elizabeth's blood went cold. She moved back into the hallway before Patricia could see her. Her hands were shaking, her heart pounding so loud she thought everyone could hear it. That wasn't medicine. That wasn't vitamins. That was something else. And suddenly, everything made sense. The illnesses, the weight loss, the way they all moved together like they were following a plan. They were poisoning him, slowly, carefully, and nobody knew but her. Elizabeth didn't tell anyone. How could she? She had no proof, just what she'd seen for a few seconds through a doorway, a vial, a hand, something poured into a bottle. If she was wrong, she'd lose this job, this room, this fragile stability she'd barely built. But if she was right, Brian was dying, slowly, and she was the only one who knew. The thought haunted her every night, kept her awake, made her sick. She thought about calling the police, but saying what? "I think the housekeeper is poisoning a child. No, I don't have evidence. Yes, I'm a maid with a fake resume who's been here 6 weeks. They'd never believe her." She thought about telling Mr. Hudson, but he was in San Francisco, gone for 2 weeks. And when he called home, Patricia was always the one who answered. Elizabeth was trapped. So she watched. She started documenting everything. The days Brian seemed worse, the meals Jenny fed him, the bottles Patricia prepared. She even saved one. Late at night when everyone was asleep, she took an empty bottle from the nursery and hid it in her room, wrapped it in a towel, put it with the green bottle in the back of her closet. She didn't know what she'd do with it, but she needed something. Anything. Brian got worse. His 2nd birthday was coming. Mr. Hudson was planning a party. Guests. Celebration. Trying to create normal in a house that was anything but. But Brian barely had energy to play anymore. He clung to Jenny, whimpered when she put him down. His eyes looked tired, too tired for a child. Elizabeth's heart broke every time she saw him. He looked more like Tyler every day. That same fragility, that same trust in adults who were supposed to protect him. One afternoon, she was cleaning the living room when she heard Mr. Hudson on the phone. "I don't care what it takes. Cancel the meetings. I'm coming home for Brian's birthday. He needs me there." His voice cracked. "I've missed too much already. Jennifer would never forgive me." Elizabeth's throat tightened. He loved his son. He was just blind, too busy, too far away to see what was happening in his own house. That evening at dinner, the tension was thick. Jenny barely touched her food. Thomas stared at his plate. Patricia sipped her tea with that cold, calm expression. "The party is Saturday," Patricia said. "Everything is arranged." Jenny's fork clattered against her plate. "Are you all right?" Elizabeth asked quietly. Jenny looked up. Her eyes were red, exhausted. For a moment, Elizabeth thought she might say something. Confess. Break. But Patricia's gaze locked on her, and Jenny looked away. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just tired." The lies were suffocating. Elizabeth lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. Saturday. The party. Guests everywhere. Mr. Hudson home. Something was going to happen. She could feel it. The way you feel a storm coming before the sky even changes. They'd been building toward this for 2 years, and Elizabeth had no idea how to stop it. She thought about Tyler. About the morning he complained his stomach hurt. About how she told her mama it was probably nothing. About how she went to class instead of staying home. About how he died that afternoon while she was studying. She'd carried that failure for 8 years. She couldn't fail again. But God help her, she didn't know what to do. Saturday came too fast. The weather was perfect, unseasonably warm for late October. Blue sky, sunlight sparkling on the water. The pool deck was decorated like something out of a magazine. Balloons, streamers, a table full of food, 50 guests, tech executives and their families, all smiling, all dressed in expensive clothes, celebrating a little boy's 2nd birthday. Elizabeth served champagne, cleared plates, stayed invisible, but her eyes never left Brian. He wore a tiny suit, looked adorable, but pale, too pale. He clung to Jenny, didn't want to play with the other children. Mr. Hudson held him for a while, kissed his head, tried to make him smile. 2 years old today, he said to a guest. His voice was proud, but tired. Can you believe it? Someone laughed. He looks just like Jennifer. Mr. Hudson's smile faltered. Yeah, he does. He set Brian down gently. Went back to talking with investors, trying to be present, but already distracted. Elizabeth watched Patricia move through the crowd, calm, controlled, checking her watch like she was waiting for something. Thomas stood near the garage, arms crossed, watching. Jenny hovered near Brian. Her face was white, hands shaking worse than Elizabeth had ever seen. Something was wrong. Elizabeth felt it in her bones. The air felt too heavy, too still, like the moment before lightning strikes. Brian toddled toward the kiddie pool, fascinated by the water, reaching for a toy floating near the edge. Then he stumbled. Not a normal stumble. His whole body went rigid. He fell into the shallow water. Mr. Hudson laughed at first, started to walk over. But Brian didn't splash, didn't play. His body seized. Mr. Hudson ran, pulled him out, screaming for help. Brian's lips were already turning blue. Not from drowning, from something else. "Call 911, someone shouted. Guests scattered, panicked, pulling out phones. Jenny rushed over, face frozen in horror. Oh God, oh God. Patricia appeared, perfectly calm. "Give him space," she said. "Help is coming." But her eyes. Elizabeth saw it. Satisfaction. This was the plan. This was what they'd been waiting for. The sirens came fast. Within minutes, 5 paramedics flooded the deck. They surrounded Brian's small body, worked with precision, oxygen mask, heart monitor, IV line. But within seconds, confusion crossed their faces. Vitals are dropping. He's not responding to oxygen. What is this? This doesn't make sense. Elizabeth stood behind the crowd, watching. She saw Brian's face, the specific discoloration, blue-gray, not normal. The way his little abdomen was swollen, the way his body trembled, and her blood turned to ice. She knew this. She'd seen this exact thing before. Tyler, on the kitchen floor in Alabama, paramedics trying the same treatments, failing the same way, because they were treating the wrong thing. This wasn't drowning, wasn't cardiac arrest. This was FPIES, food protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome, a rare allergic reaction that looked like everything else but required something completely different, something only Elizabeth knew how to fix. The lead paramedic shook his head. "We need to transport now. He's not going to make it if we stay here." But Elizabeth knew the truth. He wouldn't make it at the hospital either, not if they kept treating the wrong problem. She had maybe 3 minutes before Brian's organs shut down completely. 3 minutes to decide. Stay quiet. Keep her head down. Let the professionals handle it. Or step forward, expose everything, and save him. Elizabeth pushed through the crowd. Wait. Every head turned. 5 paramedics, 50 guests. Mr. Hudson on his knees beside his son, all staring at the maid. "Ma'am, step back. the lead paramedic said. Firm, but not unkind. We're handling this. You're treating the wrong thing. His eyes narrowed. Excuse me? He's not in cardiac arrest from drowning. He's having a food reaction. FPIES. His body is rejecting something he ingested. Your protocols won't work. The paramedic stared at her. And you know this how? Elizabeth's voice shook. Because I watched my brother die the exact same way, same symptoms, same presentation, and nobody knew what it was until it was too late. Mr. Hudson looked up at her. His face was destroyed, broken. Can you save him? Sir, we can't let, the paramedic started. Can you save him? Mr. Hudson's voice cracked, desperate. Elizabeth looked at Brian's small body, lips blue-gray, chest barely moving. She thought about Tyler, about failing him, about 8 years of running and hiding and wishing she could go back. Yes, she whispered, I think I can. Mr. Hudson turned to the paramedic. Let her try. Sir, we have protocols. My son is dying, Mr. Hudson roared. Your way isn't working. Let her try. Silence. The lead paramedic looked at Elizabeth, really looked at her, saw something in her eyes that made him pause. What do you need? 3 minutes. Something from my room. Trust. Mr. Hudson nodded. Go. Elizabeth ran. Into the house, up the stairs, her hands shaking so hard she could barely open her door. She grabbed the green bottle from the closet, the one she'd made 8 years ago, the one she'd carried city to city, job to job, the one she'd prayed she'd never need again. Her grandmother's remedy, combined with what she'd learned in medical school before she dropped out. She ran back. Brian's oxygen levels were dropping. 74%, then 71%. Elizabeth knelt beside him. This is activated charcoal suspension with oral rehydration solution and ginger extract, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. For FPIs, the reaction is in the digestive system, not respiratory. We need to bind the protein trigger and stabilize his electrolytes before his organs fail. The paramedic watched her, skeptical but listening. She administered it carefully, not too fast, small doses, monitoring his response. The seconds felt like hours. Mr. Hudson gripped the deck railing, knuckles white, praying words Elizabeth couldn't hear. 30 seconds. A minute. Brian's small body convulsed. Once, hard, expelling fluid. Then again, the monitors started changing. Oxygen, saturation, 78%. Then 82%. Then 87%. Heart rate, stabilizing. Color returning to his lips. From blue-gray to pale pink. And then, the most beautiful sound. Brian gasped, coughed, and cried. Weak, small, but alive. Mr. Hudson collapsed, sobbing. The lead paramedic stared at Elizabeth. How did you? What are you? Elizabeth's hands were shaking, tears streaming down her face. I'm someone who failed once, she whispered. I wasn't going to fail again. They rushed Brian to the hospital, stable now, but needing observation. Mr. Hudson turned back before climbing into the ambulance. Come with us, he said to Elizabeth. Please. And in that moment, she knew everything was about to change. The truth would come out. About Patricia, about the poisoning, about who Elizabeth really was. The shadows she'd been hiding in for 8 years were about to flood with light. The hospital was bright, too bright. Brian was in a room down the hall, stable, sleeping, doctors running tests, trying to understand what happened. Elizabeth sat in the waiting area, hands still shaking, her uniform still damp from the pool deck. Mr. Hudson paced, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, he stopped in front of her. How did you know? His voice was quiet, broken. Elizabeth looked up at him, this man who'd lost his wife, who was about to lose his son, who had no idea what was happening in his own home. She took a breath. I think someone in your house has been poisoning him. The words hung in the air. Mr. Hudson's face went white. What? I don't have solid proof yet, but I've been watching. Brian's been getting sick for months, always after meals, always after bottles that Patricia prepared herself. I saw her one morning, putting something into his formula, something from a vial. His hands clenched into fists. Patricia? I saved one of the bottles. It's in my room, hidden. Mr. Hudson pulled out his phone, called hospital security, then the police. Within an hour, Detective Morrison arrived. Elizabeth told him everything: the pattern, the illnesses, what she'd seen, the bottle she'd saved. "Where is Patricia now?" the detective asked. "Here," Mr. Hudson said quietly. "She came with the ambulance. Said she was worried about Brian." Detective Morrison's jaw tightened. They found her in the lobby, sitting calmly, perfectly composed. "Patricia Albright?" the detective said. "Yes. You're under arrest for the attempted murder of Brian Hudson." For the first time, her mask cracked. "Attempted murder?" Her voice was cold, sharp. "That man killed my sister. He deserves to suffer." Mr. Hudson stepped forward, face destroyed. "What are you talking about?" "Jennifer," Patricia spat. "My baby sister. You let her die. You were too busy with your precious company to notice she was bleeding out. Too important to be in the room with her. I was on a call in the next room. I found her. I called 911. I tried." "You tried too late." Patricia's voice broke, raw, years of grief pouring out. "She died alone because you weren't there. And you get to keep everything? Your company, your money, your life, while she's gone? So you tried to kill my son?" Patricia's eyes were wild now. "I wanted you to understand. To lose everything like I did. To feel that pain." Detective Morrison pulled her arms behind her back. "Read her rights." As they led her away, she screamed, "You killed her! You killed Jennifer!" The words echoed through the hallway. Mr. Hudson stood frozen. Elizabeth saw it in his face, the guilt, the weight he'd been carrying for 2 years. After Patricia was gone, he turned to Elizabeth. "I need to show you something," he said quietly. They went to a small office. He pulled up a file on his phone. Medical records. An audio file. "This is from the night Jennifer died." He pressed play. His voice: 2 years, younger, panicked, broken. "She's not breathing. There's so much blood. Please, you have to help her." The 911 operator, calm, professional. "Sir, I need you to start CPR." I'm doing it. Please, please, she's everything. Please save her." Sirens in the background. Paramedics arriving, but too late. The medical examiner's report followed. Catastrophic postpartum hemorrhage. Unpredictable, unpreventable. Nothing anyone could have done. Mr. Hudson's hands shook as he turned off the recording. "I've lived with the guilt for 2 years, he whispered, wondering if I'd been in the room instead of on that call, if I could have seen the signs earlier, if I could have saved her. He looked at Elizabeth, eyes red, raw. Patricia built a conspiracy out of grief. She convinced herself I was a monster, and she almost murdered my son because of it. Elizabeth's throat tightened. "But there's more," he said quietly. "Jenny, she was part of it too, and I need to know why." Jenny was in the waiting room when the police brought her in. Her face was pale, tear-streaked. She looked like she hadn't stopped crying since the ambulance left. Detective Morrison sat across from her. Elizabeth and Mr. Hudson watched through the glass. "Tell me the truth, Jenny," the detective said gently. "How long have you been involved?" Jenny's hands shook. 14 months. Since Patricia found me." "Found you?" She wiped her eyes. "I did one of those DNA tests. 2, 3 and me. Just for fun. I was adopted as a baby. Always wondered about my birth parents." Mr. Hudson's face changed. Something clicked. "The results came back with a match," Jenny continued. "A close relative. Edward Hudson." Elizabeth's breath caught. "I reached out to him," Jenny whispered. "He was kind, but cautious. Said he needed time, that he wanted to build a relationship slowly. That Brian was so young, and he didn't want to confuse things." Her voice broke. "I understood, but it hurt. I'd spent my whole life wondering who my father was, and when I finally found him, he asked me to wait." "So Patricia approached you," the detective said. Jenny nodded. "She found me through the same site, saw the connection, told me she was Jennifer's sister, that Edward had caused Jennifer's death, that he was neglecting Brian just like he'd neglected her." She sobbed. She said, if Brian was gone, Edward would finally see me, acknowledge me, that I'd be his only child, his heir, that we'd be a family. "So you poisoned him," the detective said quietly. "She gave me the doses, told me exactly how much, said it would just make him sick, weaken him over time, that it was justice for what Edward did to Jennifer." Jenny looked up, eyes red and swollen. "But when I looked at Brian, All I saw was a little boy who just wanted to be loved, like me, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't give him the final dose. I couldn't. Mr. Hudson stood on the other side of the glass, tears streaming down his face. "She's my daughter," he whispered. "I have a daughter." Elizabeth's heart broke for him. He opened the door, walked in, sat down across from Jenny. She looked up at him, terrified. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I was angry and desperate, and Patricia twisted everything, and I almost killed your son. I almost killed my brother." Edward reached across the table, took her hands. "I should have told you sooner," he said, voice breaking. "I was scared. I'd just lost Jennifer. I was drowning. And when you reached out, I didn't know how to be a father to you when I was barely holding it together for Brian." He squeezed her hands. "But that's not your fault. And what Patricia did, manipulating your pain, using your need for family as a weapon, that's not your fault either." Jenny wept. The detective granted her immunity for full testimony against Patricia. Later that night, Elizabeth sat alone in a hallway. Brian was going to be okay. The tests confirmed protein sensitivity, treatable with diet changes. Patricia would face trial. Jenny would get therapy. Edward would rebuild. But what about her? Mr. Hudson found her there, sat down beside her. "I know who you are," he said gently. Elizabeth's heart stopped. He pulled out a folder. "Elizabeth Davies, University of Washington Medical School, withdrew in 2016, after your brother Tyler died." She couldn't speak. "I did a background check after you saved Brian, not to threaten you, to understand you." He opened another folder. "I want to offer you something. I'm funding a fellowship at the University of Washington Medical School," Edward said quietly, "for rare pediatric emergency conditions. And I want you to finish your degree." Elizabeth stared at him. "I can't. I failed Tyler. I wasn't there when—" "You were 20 years old," Edward said firmly. "You were a student, not a doctor. You didn't fail him. The system failed him. But you've carried his memory for 8 years, and when the moment came, you saved my son." He pulled out a photo. Brian, smiling, holding a crayon drawing of a woman with curly hair, the words, "Dr. Elizabeth," scribbled at the bottom. "You're not defined by the person you couldn't save," Edward said. "You're defined by the person you did save. And all the people you're going to save when you stop running." Elizabeth's hands trembled as she looked at the drawing. "What if I'm not ready? You saved Brian when 5 trained paramedics couldn't. You're ready. And you won't be alone." 6 months later, Elizabeth walked into her first day back at medical school. Scrubs instead of a maid's uniform, books instead of cleaning supplies, a future instead of a past. She was still scared, still carried Tyler's memory. But she wasn't running anymore. Edward had kept his promise. Sold the Bellevue mansion. Too many ghosts. Bought a smaller house near the lake where Brian could play, where the air didn't feel so heavy. He traveled less now, present in ways he'd never been before, learning to be the father both his children needed. Jenny was healing too. Therapy 3 times a week, enrolled in college, building a relationship with Brian, half-sister to little brother, slowly, carefully. Patricia was serving 12 years, mandated counseling, finally beginning to process Jennifer's death without blame, just grief. And Brian, he was thriving, almost 3 now, healthy, loud, full of energy. The Marcus Davies Pediatric Center was under construction, named after the groundskeeper who'd been caught up in Patricia's lies, a man who'd lost his own child and understood the weight of that loss. On the wall of Elizabeth's new apartment hung 3 photographs: Tyler at 12, grinning in their Alabama backyard; Brian at 2, covered in birthday cake; and her grandmother, holding the green bottle that had become a bridge between old wisdom and new medicine. Elizabeth looked at them every morning, reminded that pain has purpose, that the things we carry in the darkness prepare us for moments in the light, that sometimes God breaks us just enough to reshape us into exactly who we need to be. She'd spent 8 years believing she'd failed, but the truth was simpler and more beautiful. Tyler's death had taught her what to look for. The green bottle had kept that knowledge alive, and Brian's life was the proof that nothing is wasted. Not the grief, not the guilt, not the years of running. All of it led to that moment on a pool deck when a child stopped breathing and a maid became a healer. Elizabeth picked up her bag, headed to class, ready to save the next child, and the one after that, because she wasn't invisible anymore. She was exactly who she was always meant to be. And Tyler, somewhere beyond the pain, was finally proud.